Training with the Australian SAS. The pilot asked us to sit on our seats with our seatbelt fastened until the immigration officer came aboard. This guy came on. He had 2 cans of disinfectant and he went running down that aisle and sprayed us right in the face. Really good welcome into Australia. I don't know what it was, but it could have been DDT, anything. But we all got sprayed, and he got off that aeroplane before we could get with seatbelts unfastened. A good welcome in Australia. A luxury coach took us to the SAS barracks at Fremantle. You couldn't call this a barracks. It was a 5-star resort. On the beach, sand dunes. It was a nudist beach, and there was 4 miles of it controlled by the army, and the local police had no authority over it. So all the women used to go there skinny dipping. Lovely when you went for a run. The accommodation, first class, swimming pool, had everything. And like we got into the accommodation, and then the first thing we asked was, where's the bar? Nice bar in the resort, and it was the first place we met Australian SAS troopers. And first of all, we ordered our drinks, and it was something unusual. The Australians drink minis, middies, and maxis, which are a bit puffish, to say the least. And the beer they drink is called Swan Lager. Well, you couldn't take the piss out of Swan Lager because it needed all the flavour it had. It was fucking terrible. So anyway, we told them, dispense with these little minis, middies, and maxis, and we'll have a litre glass each. So all sat down and started, well, their SAS started to talk to us first. Oh, you've got a gook with you. We looked at each other. A gook? They'd just finished fighting in Vietnam, and they referred to coloured people and Vietnamese as gooks. The enemy were called gooks. And we had Fijians in the regiment and in B Squadron. Now, these Fijians were 6'6" and built like brick shithouses. So when we found out what they were referring to, our gook, the Fijian, went over to the one that called him a gook, picked him up and hit him over the bar. He flew, and that was the end of the gook language. So we started off well, having a fight with the Australian SAS. We later went on to town in Perth, and because of our English accents, they were starting to, in some bars, they were calling us pongos. Pongos. That's another term the Aussies have for the English. Where the English go, the pongos. Because in the olden days, apparently we used to bath once a week, which was true. But so the 10-pound bombs didn't wash that often, and therefore they were called pongos. So we were fighting in there as well, in the bars. It was a good start to Australia. The first working day was to be a debriefing. The Australian SAS were going to give us a debrief about their time fighting in Vietnam, and Lieutenant Colonel Jeeps was to give a debrief about the SAS, British SAS fighting in the Oman. The Aussies initially were used as intelligence gathering, which is the operation function of the SAS. They would go behind enemy lines and gather intelligence on routes and roads, camps that the enemy were taking. And they were very effective at their job. But later on, the mission changed. The Americans wanted a kill ratio, like American dead compared to Viet Cong dead. They wanted the kill ratio. And so the operation changed into doing electrical ambushes. A 4-man team would abseil from a helicopter into the jungle, and then carefully march about a kilometre to known tracks and set up these ambushes, which were multi-claymore mines and grenades, hand grenades, the old Mills bombs set up on ring mains, where you'd put 7 bombs to go off simultaneously, and they'd put these amongst the trees and everything. And the 4-man team would they'd have 1 man counting them in, clicking the enemy into the ambush, and another one clicking them out. Then it was up to the patrol commander to detonate the ambush. But they said that sometimes there was hundreds and sometimes thousands of Viet Cong moving down these tracks, and it was totally impractical to ambush them, because if they did it, they would be followed up and captured. So they had to ambush smaller groups, and they were very effective at doing it, and they showed us pictures of all the kills that they had. If the ambush was initiated or they were compromised, they would bug out to an RV where a helicopter would come in, drop a rope down through the jungle canopy, and they would clip on using carabiners attached to the belts, and the helicopter would pull them out. One of the deaths caused was a malfunction of the carabiner, or the SAS trooper hadn't connected it properly. But they lost 1 man falling to his death. His body never recovered as they were getting followed up by Viet Cong. Another death which occurred was when a trooper went out just to relieve himself, have a shit. He forgot the password on the way back and was killed by a comrade. Real sad one, that. And other 2 men were lost and killed in action. So in the total operation in Vietnam, they only lost 4 men. When Lieutenant Colonel Jeeps gave a debriefing on the operations of the British SAS in the Oman, and he told them that we'd lost 10% of the regiment, they found it incredible that we'd lost so many men fighting this Arab war in the Oman. So we became comrades, and we learned skills from them. They were very good at abseiling from helicopters, so they improved our situation with that. And in general, we worked with them very well. I went on a diving course. Now, believe it or not, they had an SBS, British SBS, sergeant instructor teaching their boat troop. Wow. And we didn't have one in Hereford. He was an expert. So we did a course of how to dive, and the diving site was off an island called Rockness Island, where they had a little barracks, which we were ferried over on a landing craft. And the picture I show is that Australian landing craft. And I've made a blow-up of the air tank, because it was a really old thing which had a bar at the side that when you started to run out of air, you pulled the bar and you've got an extra 10 minutes of air. So that was interesting to know. And we learned all the signs that if you were out of air, what to do. And so we went on 2 or 3 dives in shallow water. Then my first deep dive over 80 foot, I was attached to a boat troop instructor from the Australian SAS. So I'm on this cord and rope with him, and down, and we're catching crayfish. And I hadn't been down too long, but I must have been breathing heavy. I'm a heavy breather. And my air started to get run out, so I pulled the reserve, which is supposed to give me 10 minutes, and my air stopped. I had nothing. So I didn't panic. I swam over to the guy and giving him a sign that I had no air. And he just looked at me. I'm thinking, come on, have I got this sign right? So I did it again a couple of times. Still, he didn't give us his demand valve. So, still not panicking, but getting short of air. I was holding my breath for a minute now. I took my mouthpiece out and pressed to show him I had no air. Then I put it down and put my hand out for him to give us his demand valve. And he still didn't give us a demand valve. So I'm thinking, is this trying to kill me or what? So I was getting angry with him, and I shouted at him, I'm fucking drowning! And I started kicking for the surface. The SBS boy, the sergeant, was doing a top dive, safety dive. He was looking out for sharks and making sure nobody got into trouble. And he picked up I was on trouble and heading up fast. And before I reached the surface, he gave us his demand valve, but I didn't give him it back because I'd been drowning for about 3 minutes by this time, and my lungs were full of water, and I couldn't swallow any more water. It's horrible feeling drowning, I assure you. So we got to the surface, and he says, "You're supposed to share the demand valve." Well, I couldn't speak to him at this stage because I had a nosebleed and I wasn't feeling too good. So they pulled me onto this landing craft, and after 10 minutes I recovered and explained to him what had happened. Well, he couldn't believe that the instructor didn't give us the demand valve, so he went over and talked to him. It turned out this guy had false teeth, and he'd put his demand valve so it wouldn't come out, so he couldn't pass it to me anyway. So the SBS lad actually court-martialed the Aussie SBS guy, the Aussie SAS lad. So he'd been a sergeant. I think he got reduced to the ranks for trying to kill me. But you laugh about it after, but it wasn't funny at the time. And the SBS lad, the sergeant, turned round and says, "Nigel, if you don't go back down, you won't go back down. Put on a tank and let's go back down. I'll go with you." So we went down and we did another dive, come back up slowly, and from then on I used to do diving. But no way was I ever going to get tied to anybody. We learned how to attack ships and put mines on them. And going back all 40 odd years ago, there was no computers at the time. So everybody who dives now has computers and magic stuff that they can get directions with. But in them days, you used to have a board, a black board with a white line and an arrow on it, and a compass screwed to the board. So you'd go to the surface and take a bearing on the ship you want to attack. And then you'd go dive deep and go in the direction your compass told you. It worked. So you don't need computers. But it was real basic stuff in them days. One exercise I remember well is we flew in a Jolly Green Giant helicopter from Perth up to the Australian training area, which was the size of England. It was incredibly, you could free fire anywhere in that area. But we did a canoeing exercise. We went from the mainland over to an island, and the idea was to climb a cliff and put demolition charges on an installation on the island, and then get back into the canoes and come back to the mainland. So we canoed across, and we got out of the canoes and we anchored them, and we're climbing the cliff, and for some reason I looked back down, and when I looked down there were sharks all the way around the canoes, as big as the canoes, some of them. And so I tapped the lad in front of me on the leg and I pointed down. So when we came back to get in the canoes, it was like the advertisement for Ever Ready, where you keep your arms out of the water and paddle like hell on an Ever Ready battery. But it was still good training, and now I understand Crocodile Dundee. One animal that you only find on Rockness Island is a thing called a waka. I think that's what you call it. And it's a cross between a kangaroo and a rat. So this animal's got the freedom of the island. You can't lock the doors. They've got swing doors on the barracks, so the walkers can go in and out, and you can't kick their ass. So that's the only Australian we didn't kick. A member of the Australian SAS came around and started to talk to her and said, if we transferred directly from England to the Australian SAS, we'd get all these extra pay and the conditions of the Australian SAS. And the Aussies look after their soldiers, not like the British Army. So I was tempted, and I said to my wife, "You fancy going to live in Australia?" She says, "Oh, it's too far from my mother." I didn't say anything, but I was thinking, that's just far enough.